Welcome to Neon Galactic, a podcast produced by PBS affiliate Keat TV in Eureka, California. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Productions like this are made possible through the support of viewers and listeners like you. One of the first obsessions I fell into as a result of my curiosity about the possibility of UFOs, UAPs, and NHI was the enigma that is Skinwalker Ranch. I read Hunt for the Skinwalker and Skinwalkers at the Pentagon by George Knapp, Colm Kelleher, and later James Lukatsky. And while the claims made in those volumes stretch the bounds of traditional reality, I trust that all three of them have better things to do than make up ghost stories for their own amusement. The books certainly didn't sell well enough to build any fortunes or launch any careers, and what's reported in those volumes has the potential to change the way we think about reality. Of the show, I was at first skeptical. At times, the production style seems a bit over the top, and the editing is certainly done with an eye toward entertainment. That being said, I love it. The Skinwalker crew, Travis Taylor, Eric Bard, Brandon Fugal, Tom Winterton, Brian Arnold, Kaleb Bench, Jim Morse, Candace Lindy, and Tom Lewis are seemingly earnest and likable, and I believe that they are in it for the answers, not just for History Channel ratings. I've interviewed Travis Taylor at the 2022 Phenomicon, perhaps my most watched interview ever, and was thrilled to find him a serious scientist with a passion for solving what is perhaps the most intriguing mystery currently facing humankind. Our guest today is Kaleb Bench, a security specialist on the ranch who has since become an indispensable utility player on the show, a relatable and obviously nice guy. I'm hoping to dig a little deeper into his experience on the show with the phenomenon and how it's all impacted his life. Welcome to the show, Kaleb.
No, thanks for having me on. Excited.
So, first off, I want to start off with who was Kaleb Bench before the whole Skinwalker thing
Oh
began?
man.
It's a big question,
So,
right?
right. So I grew up Southeast Idaho, just kind of regular farm kid. I helped out on a bunch of family farms, yes, growing potatoes, doing hay, stuff like that. Um, played sports in high school, went to Utah State where I played football and rugby, and then was in the Marine Corps Reserve as a M1A1 tank crewman, and got an honorable discharge from that after 6 years. And then I actually quit going to school a little about 1 year, well, probably one good semester before graduating, because my dad ended up having cancer and asked me to come and help with the family business. And college, it, it something just felt wrong. Like what was the point?
Yeah.
And so I ended up going back up to Idaho and working for about a year, and that's when I ended up meeting my wife, and she's from here, so I'm actually Thomas Winterton's brother-in-law.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved down here in 2014. It was about a year after my dad had passed away, and the business ended up um, not existing anymore. Essentially, it kind of there were some things that came up and family stuff like that. But anyways,
Sure.
so I've lived here now for 10 years. I was in the oil field for a little bit, and then I helped with the public transportation system out here, and the ranch actually came up because like Tom is very entrepreneurial, and Jim Morse actually stayed at his hotel that he was owning at that time, and Tom ended up doing a lot of work on the ranch, becoming the superintendent, and doing a lot of work for Brandon. And Brandon, about a year after, or about a year and a half after Tom been helping him and running the ranch, Brandon asked him for some help on the security side, and Tom was like, "Oh, my brother was in the Marines, and he's a big guy, Um, and Brandon was like, "Great, does he have black clothes?" Yeah, and I was hired essentially, and that's pretty much how the phone call went. It was like, "Hey, if you want to come help with security, we're getting reports that there's a bunch of people going to try and come onto the ranch on Halloween," and this was 2017.
Yeah.
And so I started helping with security then, and that's actually what led me into law enforcement. So I've been doing law enforcement now for over 5 years, and went through the academy, did all that stuff, and then we had some, and that's kind of what I've brought to the table and helped with the team is kind of the law enforcement consulting, and then obviously security and stuff. And I did a little bit of that in college, and just kind of a natural fit. So that's kind of the lowdown um,
Yeah.
of where
Now,
how I got there.
Brian Arnold is, I mean, I don't mean to, is there a like a boss employee relationship? Or are you both partners? How would you describe it? Just
No, he's more he's kind of always been more like the safety officer role.
okay, yeah.
And I've actually been more like on the security side, and they actually kind of show that in the second or the first episode of the second season is they try to show, Bryant is more kind of taking that safety officer role, and then they shift more of the security side over to my side, and so it's kind of more like a partnership, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
um and that's kind of how it's always been. So, and Brian obviously is, best friends with Brandon, has been for years, um, and he lives out in Salt Lake, and so it was a lot harder for him to get out here, and that's kind of why they reached out to Tom to see if they had someone in the area that could help fulfill that and help on that side.
When the concept of a show came up, how
Mhm.
did that conversation go? And it seems to me that in the first season you had a little bit of a lighter role, and then you really became full on present in the second season. How did that? Did they ask you straight up, do you want to be on a television program, or was it just that it worked out that way?
It just kind of worked out that way. So essentially, I wasn't a part of any of the conversations for the show. Like I heard through Tom what was potentially going to happen, and it was kind of one of those things that were like, yeah, right. It
Yeah,
wasn't in anybody's mind. That wasn't any. Honestly, the ranch was kind of that. Like a cool opportunity to be a part of at first, and to make some extra income at that point.
yeah.
And then it just got more serious. And when the show kind of came around, I technically wasn't a member of the cast the first year. Because I was like, I just want to focus on security.
Yeah.
And then the second season is when they extended the offer to become a cast member, and my roles just increased from then. And that's what's been cool is Brandon's very cool about bringing opportunities, and I was like, great, I'm gonna try and make what I can of it, and provide what if I can add value to the team, I will. And that's where it was like the law enforcement side, and then some other personal ways I view things. And then I've, just been on the ranch. I've just had so many experiences, and learned a lot from Eric and Travis, and obviously the team, and obviously the last 6, 7 years, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, no,
So,
I bet. And that's what I love about the show, honestly, is that like you have these group of people, they all have different skill sets, but they're all working toward the same, solution, and no one's poo-pooing anyone else's ideas. It's like
mm,
it's generally respectful. If you have a
yeah.
thought or a consideration, you often provide an insight or something that like if it was a bunch of arrogant scientists or whatever, a lot of times they may be cloistered and being like, you do your job, we'll do ours. But it's way more democratic, it seems like, on
Yeah,
screen. And
yeah, that we get along really well with each other, and that's the thing is, when like Travis, for example, when he first came out, he was kind of like, oh, you guys are all a bunch of crazy hillbillies out here, chasing the flashing light, or the soda can or whatever. And made no, kind of made fun of us for being crazy and all that stuff. But then within, he was the one with the biggest turnaround and going, holy, like, what's going on out here?
yeah, and he's
And
since become a national figure in that whole discussion. I mean, with the UAP task force and all that, he's right in the
yep.
center of all of it.
Oh yeah, and that's what was really cool is, because of what happened on Skinwalker Ranch and the things that he saw here, is he ran that up to people, because at that time with his job and what he was involved with, he was seeing stuff that brought concerns to him, and he ran that up. And that's why Jay Stratton ended up reaching out to him, and um, getting him on the task force, and becoming a part of that because of what he was seeing out here and what we were doing out here, and showing that it's real. And you brought up with like the show and the editing and all that stuff. Yeah, we hear that all the time, but we're like, okay, just minus that and really look at what you're seeing. Like
Exactly.
everything you're seeing is what they're filming.
Yeah.
We're not making any of that stuff up. And one of our favorite conversations with a lot of our, our film guys and the production team is a lot of them have done shows where they are creating things like they have a producer in the back moving something or they're knocking something, and the cast is sitting there
Yeah.
going, "Oh, what's that?" But
Yeah.
the camera guys come out here, the sound guys or whoever, and that's what they're expecting. And then they start seeing stuff and they're going, "Wait a minute, this isn't fake."
Mind
And
blowing.
yeah, and that's what, we've had some talks about that, of breaking what they call the fourth wall.
Mhm.
But this production company, they choose not to do.
Yeah.
Other ones do, and that's fine. It's just what it is at this point. So
Yeah. Well, that's like I tell my wife. She's more critical of the editing style, and it's not necessarily you guys. It's just like, the Hollywood dun 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 kind of stuff.
yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
that stuff doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's like the investigation that's ongoing and the conversations you guys are having and the real curiosity that I read on all of your faces is what draws me in. I mean, it reeks of truth to me. So I love it. I absolutely love the chemistry you guys have and the
yeah.
work you guys are doing. So I mean, you were on the ranch pretty early before the show. Were you convinced of the sort of the paranormal possibilities of the ranch before the show started, or were you did that come on as you kind of got into production?
So that's a loaded question. Um,
Good.
so I'm a very I've had experiences. So after my dad passed away, I was going through obviously some rough stuff because I didn't have a good relationship with my dad, and I grew up around religions but never really in them.
Mhm.
And I always felt like there was something there, or but I never really delved into it. And you could say that I was living of the world in the world kind of thing, and eat, drink, be merry, because for tomorrow we die kind of mindset where you just do things because you want to have fun, you want to have an experience. Like our generation right now, that's what they're so focused on because there's not a lot of meaning in people's lives.
Exactly
Um,
right, man.
and so after my dad passed away, I had some, and I almost ended up taking my own life essentially because I was just in a really dark place.
Yeah,
Because I'd struggled with depression, I'd struggled with a lot of different things, um, and it was just one day I've just got hit that point, and I just ended up going down a different road and rethinking a lot of things, and that led me down a really cool path where I experienced some very powerful experiences where, yeah, I essentially can't deny that there's Christ and God, um and that's one of those things where it's like I that's like a whole different discussion.
sure.
But I've always been like, so one of the things I studied in college is I've always been a big history guy. I've always studied mythology. And yes, I grew up with Star Wars. I grew up with, a lot of science fiction and fantasy and stuff, a big fan of, like, say, Blizzard
Yeah,
and their products growing up, and then, like Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. And so it was like one of those things when I first started hearing about the ranch, I was like, okay, like, I've never been one that really was like interested in UFOs or UAPs or anything like that, because I guess coming from my when I really had my conversion to faith and things like that, some of the stuff that we see in the scriptures and things is that God's created world without number. And so I've always kind of been like, well, why wouldn't there be other forms of life? And we're
yeah,
kind of, and there's areas where it kind of talks about that, because, and that's where it's like I don't look at a lot of, like, the faith side the same way as a lot of people, I guess. Like I look at God's a creator. He created us so we could be creators and
yeah,
things like that.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
and like the Bible's not about religion. It's about being successful. It's about learning the natural laws that he created the world, and was like, here, you guys, you learn this, and this is what will happen. And
yeah,
and and, and that's a personal thing for everybody, I think.
yeah,
Um, but so when I came to the ranch, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, I started hearing the stories. I started delving into it. The I heard about the ranch, through some conversations when I moved down here, but I can probably count on my hand the amount of times I heard about it. But I was like, oh, okay, whatever. It never
Yeah.
really like stuck inside my head, as a topic.
Yeah.
It was like a here or there thing. And about 6 months before Tom asked me to come to the ranch and help with security and all that, it obviously become a very big topic with my family because of Tom's involvement and stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and my wife and her family was all excited that Tom was out there and doing stuff. And I was like, okay. But and so like about 6 months before it came out is when I learned about the book from George Knapp and them. And
Yeah.
honestly, I only made it about halfway through before I was like, okay, like the first, the obviously the story at the very beginning with the wolf,
Yeah.
it
And
draws
the
you in.
calf through the fence or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And then a couple other things, like the one that stuck out was how the apparently the two dogs got turned into goo or something.
Mm.
And those were the only two things I really remember sticking in my head. And I never finished it. I only made it about halfway through. I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and so like my knowledge really wasn't a lot when I first went out there, but Tom started telling me stuff, and then I started personally having experiences.
Yeah.
Um, Probably relatively short of my time being out there, especially now that I look back and see all the things. And this is what, for me, I think is really cool with how my experience ties into a bunch of this is now that I've been in law enforcement and having been in the military and stuff, I look at things a lot more chronologically, or how evidence is supposed to back things. And
Yeah.
the term I've been using a lot is the totality of the circumstances. Like look at everything together,
Yeah.
because people want to pick and choose um, events or pieces of things, and that's all they focus on to
Yeah.
try and prove or disprove their
Something that they
point,
already think. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
because they're looking for that confirmation bias, but then they won't actually look at the entirety of the circumstances, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's one of those things that's been really fun with the ranch side and the investigation is I see things and I bring it up to Eric or Travis and they go, oh yeah, and they're like, oh, that's great. Like I didn't even see that or think of it that way.
Hmm.
Or those little reminders and things. And so it's like um one of the things that for me is I wasn't front loaded with a lot of information. And so one of the first experiences, like the first big experience that I had out there, was I was out with two guests. So this is really early on. Um, it was 1:30 in the morning, and I was between Homestead 2 and Homestead 3. So I was very close to the location where we found the 1.6 in like
Hmm.
season 2 or season 3.
Yeah.
And sounds like you've been following the show pretty regularly, so you
Religiously.
know,
Yeah.
right? Just 2 episodes ago where the rocket got stuck in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was pretty much standing close. I was probably about 100 yards from that spot next to the bait pen that's between Homestead 2 and Homestead 3. And essentially what happened is we're standing there, it's pitch, it's dark. It's wasn't a night where we had a full moon, we didn't have a lot of stars, we had some cloud cover. And imagine standing in a room that's dark and someone flips the light on, but it's green.
Hmm.
Of all colors, it's green.
Yeah.
you know, and I could see the mesa clearly, like so it was like someone flipped the light switch on.
It was bright
And
then. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah. Okay.
so, but that's what was crazy. It was I wasn't seeing like shadows, like a light source coming. But that's what was interesting is there was a light above Homestead 2 that was descending down in a controlled manner, and it wasn't green. It was like amber yellowish color, and that green was like very brief. But that's where like we looked, me and the other two guests, we like looked at each other and was like, what the crap? And
Yeah.
looking around, and then that green kind of faded out, and that's when that light was descending out, and it looked like it either went down because we have where the homestead is. There's these old trees that surround the homestead, and And I don't know if that light went right down straight into Homestead 2 or if it was a little bit further back by the mesa and went away over there. But when it went behind the trees, it disappeared and everything went back to normal. And that was
Yeah.
like the first time I was like, what the heck is really going on out here?
Yeah.
Because I had some smaller things that were kind of like interesting, but nothing like big like that.
Yeah.
And that was June 2018, so 6 to 7 months after I really come to the ranch.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets cool is I let Eric and Brandon know, I sent them a text immediately about what I just seen, kind of like a little mini report in the text,
Yeah. Yeah.
described as everything that happened as best as I could. And um, Eric, he had a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Jacques Vallée when they
Oh
had
yeah.
first, when Brandon had first bought the ranch. They had some meetings with some of the old Bigelow guys at that transition time.
Hmm.
And he had seen, or I don't know if he was given this or if, well, I think he was because he's got it somewhere. Um, but in this journal from Jacques Vallée, he talks about a green light and basically the same thing I had just experienced.
Oh wow.
Eric did not tell me about this until years later when he had gone through and found that piece of paper
Yeah.
and pulled me in. And this was only like a year ago when he pulls me up and he's like, "Hey, you remember this? Obviously, your your experience with the green." And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want to show you something. When you told me this is what I immediately thought of." And he showed me this page from Jacques Vallée's journal or talking about the green light, and I was like, "That's nuts!" Like,
Yeah.
and so that kind of event for me has happened a lot where I've experienced something and then years later or sometimes years later, sometimes shorter than that, another witness or another event happens that we actually catch on camera
It confirms it, right? Basically,
and
you're.
confirms it. And so
Yeah.
one of those big ones would be so when you look at season 5, we did these interviews in the posts and these post recap episodes that they're coming out now with too. And one of the questions I was asked was if you could describe season 5 as in one word, what would you say? And my word was validation, because
Yeah.
so much had happened in season 5 that had connected back to so many of my experiences that at that point had only been stories and that
Yeah.
and things that I had witnessed that
Yeah.
I didn't have a piece of evidence to go with it to show people. And so think like the green lasers going up and there's the break in the
The break.
lasers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we kind of had that during the telescope night from season 3, where
When the titles of the stars went out of the database or whatever, that
yep.
whole thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you remember, Bryant, Travis, and I went to the Triangle to shoot some rockets.
Hmm.
And while we were there, because one of the ideas was we were going to put the telescopes to where they could see through the airspace of directly above the triangle, and one of the obviously the areas that we've had some interest in, and see if there was any visual things that we could see happening with the rockets with the telescopes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we couldn't align the telescopes to that area because of all the issues going with the telescopes. And so we went shoot the rockets, and I had a little laser pointer, and I was like, I've always wanted to go out. At that point, I always wanted to go with the laser pointer and sit there and see what would happen
Yeah.
in the triangle. And so I went out there with a handheld and started shooting it up into the air. And the first thing that happened was the laser comes up and it looks like it hit something, but then it has a break and then it continues.
So you saw that way before it ever came up on camera.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
by the time I get there, I got Travis and the guys over. That's when it started doing all the other stuff they did record. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the laser splitting, the
The little V thing at the end of it or whatever, right?
yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And then Bryant got a picture where you can see at the very tip the laser's bending. And so yeah, we got some evidence there. but like the very first thing I saw was that break in the laser, and then 2 or 3 years later, we get these giant lasers going up, and you see that same break happening.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that's awesome because that's exactly what I had seen years before, but we didn't have any proof of it. So I felt like finally, like,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing has happened a lot. So another one is I saw a cloaked object above the area of the petroglyph and where we've seen the spire of the data through Pete
Yeah.
Kelsey's scan. Um, and um,
You saw what
I,
there though?
a
What was
cloaked
it?
object.
Like something that was distorting the background, like kind of a, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So this was season one, and
Mhm.
I was, I was with the group, but I wasn't a cast. I wasn't part of the scene or anything like that. I was off in the back, not
Yeah.
wanting to bug anybody or anything. And um, I just was, and it was a fall day. It was September, I want to say, maybe late August, but it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and a really nice day. Like there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And this is what's crazy is how I don't even know how I could even see this, or the chances of me seeing was there was this object and I was just watching these birds or something, and they were I was just watching their flight path and it looked um like when you have like a ball of glass or something and when something goes behind it,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the refraction or the reflection of it distorts it, right?
Yeah.
And so there was this object sitting there and this bird comes flying and it instantly does like this. I could literally see like half the body of the stretch kind of thing because of where it's coming in, and it did that weird refraction. I think is the right term for it. And then as it goes passes behind whatever this object was, it snaps back into the original
Yeah.
spot
Yeah.
and continues on its way. And I'm sitting there just looking at this area in the sky, like, what the heck did I just see? And I just really just focused on that area of the sky, and I ended up seeing what I describe as kind of like a rectangular shaped object with curved edges. And so I couldn't help but think like a bar of soap
Yeah.
that is that rectangular shape, but it's not sharp edges, right? It's very curved
Yeah.
um, edges. And I was like, what the heck? And I was far enough away from the group where I was like, I don't want to start yelling and stuff and
Hmm.
interrupt this because I was like, am I really seeing this?
Yeah. Yeah. That's got to be the natural question, right?
Right. Yeah. And so I start walking backwards and looking at this object because I was like, okay, maybe if I go grab another person and I can point this out. And if they're seeing it too, then we'll bring it to the attention of everybody.
Yeah.
But as I start moving back, that's where I go because it was just sitting there still in the sky. It wasn't
Yeah.
moving or anything at that point. And the moment I start walking back and like trying not to lose it is when it starts picking up speed and going along the face of the mesa towards the triangle. And it basically goes, and I lost it. And I actually didn't tell anybody about that until Pete Kelsey came to the ranch and performed his scan and found the anomaly in his photogrammetry scan. And that was I want to say it was about 8 months later
Yeah.
when
Wow.
he and Eric do that, and and I went in and saw that, and Eric was like, "I want to show you this." And I was like, "Eric, I have to tell you what I saw up there because I don't know." One of the ideas was, what if Pete Kelsey's photogrammetry drone was flying through the air and the object was because it was in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
And there's a part where when you turn that spire data, it looks like there could potentially be like a rectangular object in there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not saying that's what caused that anomaly in the photogrammetry, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, they're coincident. They're happening at the same place, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
And
wow.
then we ended up having a guest on the ranch. His name's Stephen Wall, and he had described. So he lived on the ranch during the Sherman's time, um, before Bigelow bought the ranch,
Yeah.
and he was their nephew. And so he actually was one of the people who had seen some of the stuff that was written in the George Knapp book.
Yeah.
Um, and he related seeing a cloaked object like that, but he called it like an egg shaped. So kind of similar,
Similar,
but
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and so he described it how it was like coming over him and passed over him. So I could see I was more from a side angle and he saw it straight on. So maybe there's, depending on the dimensions or whatnot, a little bit different shape. But I was like, dude, I saw that too. And that was like 2 or 3 years later that we had that conversation. So a
Yeah.
lot of stuff like that.
Keeps coming full circle, and you feel like like you said, confirms things that you've had before that you maybe weren't
Yeah,
maybe
I
questioning yourself, but now you're like, okay, that's absolutely what happened because someone else saw the same thing, right?
Yeah, and again, the big part of that is I had no idea who Steve Wall was. I had no idea if he had seen that, and,
Mhm.
and that's kind of been my experience. Is I've experienced something, and later I find out that that is something that has been reported or someone else has also experienced themselves.
Yeah.
So like another big one is like Chris Bartell. I
Yeah.
had an eye injury on the ranch at one point, and Chris Bartell, he was a security officer on the Bigelow's team,
Hmm.
and he actually had an eye injury as well. And one of the things that I've got is a photo from mine. And when you go watch what happens to the calf, that where it got microwaved essentially
Oh yeah,
is
with its
our
eyes, right? Yeah, yeah,
eyes, and it's blind. We removed it from the property, and it's
yeah.
recovered other than it's blind.
It's
So
not going to
whatever.
get its sight back, basically.
No,
Yeah.
its eyes are gone essentially. But yeah,
Was
and
your
he and I,
was your sorry, was your eye injury caused by the phenomenon, or was it really?
that's our best guess. Um,
Wow.
and that's where I've shared some of that on our website, the Skinwalker Insider
Yeah,
web
and
page.
I'll link that in the description so people, if they want to take a look and maybe subscribe. I'm
Mm-hmm,
subscribed. I think it's great. So
mm-hmm,
it's worth the money if you like the show
mm-hmm. Yeah,
for
and
sure.
so I was really like I'm obviously we didn't want the cow or the calf or the livestock out here to get fried or hit by whatever, or
Yeah,
mutilated. We don't want to see that. But when the calf happened and we were having that discussion with the veterinarian and stuff, I couldn't help but think about my eye and what happened with Chris Bartell.
yeah,
Because, and then I'm not, a lot of the guys on the team have had eye things happen. Not, I think I've had the worst when it comes to eye things. And then obviously Tom's injury
yeah. With the swelling
years
and
ago.
the what was the? I mean, can I ask what technically happened to your eye? Like, what? How did the doctors report it? What was the injury?
So, um, the best guess I've been given, and I've spoken to multiple eye doctors. So the eye doctor I went to, and then my aunt actually is a really good eye doctor too, and she was one that immediately once she found out, she was asking me questions and stuff, and I showed her the picture and all that. But essentially, what you can see is the or what happened was we were actually out with a group who had a bunch of equipment from the INL. It's Casey Smith with Qualtech, who we've had on the
Yeah,
ranch multiple times,
yeah,
because Brandon has always been very serious about, doing those types of scans where we bring out radiation detectors or having the tri-field meters, or to see if we pick up something in the environment that's potentially dangerous.
yeah,
So I was out there with this group doing one of those doing one of those precautionary testing of multiple areas on the ranch. And I had my hat on, I had my sunglasses. It was a nice day. Like I don't remember a whole lot of wind, and I was actually standing on top of the mesa just above Homestead 2. And this is where my eye just goes. I just felt like it went dry, and I was like, "What the heck?" And it was kind of towards the end of us being in that area.
yeah.
And so we came down off the um, mesa, and then the next day I wake up and my eyes like basically on fire, and I've never been in this much pain before in my life. And
Oh,
I get to the eye doctor, and he puts some stuff in it to numb it, like pretty powerful like drug.
yeah.
And then he puts this dye in my eye and hits it with the blue light, and the you can see it clearly defined, like not like a full triangle, but there's like these clearly defined angles.
Yeah.
And the bottom quarter of my eye is fine, but the rest of it in this blue light was coming back pure white. And he was like, that's the area that's damaged. And he described the surface of my eye as a ripple. Like if you had thrown a rock into a pond and see the ripples go across the surface. And he's like, that was just the surface of my eye. And so luckily it didn't hit anything in the rear of the eye. And he was like, the surface of your eye is extremely regenerative. And you should be okay. But if it doesn't, like, let us know. And it
Yeah.
was about 2 weeks before it was fine. But I was in bed for a couple days after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the eye doctor, when he took it, he was like, I don't know what caused this, essentially. He's like, I'm going to ask around, but I never heard anything back. So I don't think anybody really knew. Um,
Had he ever seen anything like that, or did he?
he,
No.
he said he hadn't. And he threw out the possibility of some, maybe it's some kind of virus or something, but for it to happen so fast, he's
Yeah.
like, usually or, most of the time, there's a lot of other signs.
Yeah.
And I got on and I looked around at a bunch of different diseases and viruses and stuff, and nothing ever looked like that because a lot of those they're a lot more like goopy, they're a lot more gross like that, and they're never really like uniform the way
With
that.
straight lines and whatnot, right? I mean, that's odd.
Yeah, and then the other one I talked to was Dr. Christopher Lee, who was Brandon's really good friend, and he's really one of the top guys when it comes to like cancer treatments and radiation and things like that.
He was in the early parts of the show, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was able to have a conversation with him about it. He's like, well, it wasn't like radiation, like what they use to treat cancer and stuff. Because he's like, if it had been something like that, you'd have gotten your eyes would have cauterized, or you would have formed like cataracts,
Yeah.
things like that. But he's like, but you definitely got hit by some kind of energy, and he's like, I have no idea what it was. And then talking with Travis and Eric later, it's they were like the closest thing they could think of was some kind of microwave radiation or something like that. It's the exact same kind of stuff that happened with the cow, but again, it's something that like we can't prove that.
Yeah.
There's no way of proving it's the same. I got hit by the same stuff.
Yeah. Is there a sense? I mean, like, so that happened to you. What happened to Thomas happened to Thomas. Uh, People might ask, why go back? I mean, were you afraid after that of like, what's your feeling about like your own personal risk that you might be taking with that kind of stuff? Do you ever think about that, or is it like you compartmentalize that and go on and do your duty?
Yeah, I just compartmentalize it, but it was definitely so when we saw what happened with the calf, because just looking at the circumstances, it was broad freaking daylight.
Yeah,
You know, it was no more at first. It was no more than 75 feet to 100 feet from us, from where
yeah,
we were located. And when we start seeing that, you start seeing it spinning in circles and freaking out like that. And then
yeah,
I was like, what the heck? And I walked down to it, so where I was no more than 30 feet from it at one point.
yeah.
And that was one of the first times I actually kind of had a lot of this, like, oh crap, like, especially when we had the conversation with the vet, and I was like, what the heck? We were only 30 feet from that.
Yeah.
And that's very suggestive. And that's where it's hard to say, of was this targeted? Was this a warning? That kind of,
Exactly.
you
That's what I
know,
was thinking with what happened to you plus then the calf. It's like it's almost could be read as an accelerated warning. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
keep doing what you're doing, something bad's gonna happen.
exactly. And yeah, that gave us definitely gave me more of a pause of like, is it worth it? Kind of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where, the first couple times and other things that I've seen on the ranch, I just compartmentalize it because, yeah, I've been in the Marines. I'm
Yeah.
law enforcement. It's kind
Yeah.
of the nature of the job is you're going to be involved with situations where people get hurt.
Yeah.
And it's, there's why be afraid of it? It's,
You guys take
nothing.
precautions, you know. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys monitor
We,
the environment and
Yeah, we do what we can, but this is the thing is, especially like look at the instance when I got hit by whatever it was. I had some of the top radiation equipment in the country. I had gamma ray detectors. We had from this company who specializes in going and teaching chemical biological warfare protection to the military and deals with this stuff all the time, and none of their equipment registered anything. And then on top of that, this is comes back to like one of the things that Eric hit day one when he comes out there was there's some kind of magnetic field or fingerprint or that's extremely transitory and you never know when it's going to come and go.
Yeah.
And we catch stuff just in these fleeting moments, and that's where he's come up with this. What he'd love to be able to do is what we call, or what he's called, the light garden, where we instrument out the entire ranch, and it's extremely low. Like you could see all these things, all these meters, or all these pieces of instrumentation and things across the ranch on the screen. Like he's got a really cool visual representation of this that he
Mhm.
shows people, where you'll see all these pieces of equipment like flashing, getting data and all that stuff. But then potentially could we see like a wave going across the ranch, or like a
Ah,
localized area, again, like a ripple of
yeah.
data spreading out.
Yeah.
And if we could do that, and to instrument something like that would be, that's quite the project.
Yeah.
But if we were able to do something like that, like that's what Eric's been trying to visualize and trying to figure out how to get going. And but because we've kind of seen that.
Yeah. Well, and then Omnitech is come on the show this last season, and they're
Mhm.
kind of trying to work towards something like that, right? I mean, would you
Yeah,
say?
they're trying to help Eric in that,
Yeah.
and try and catch that vision and try and do that. But that that's above my pay grade in those
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah.
But, yeah,
Um, is there a sense, I mean, you described a lot of dramatic experiences, and having talked or listened to like Bryant and other folks, some of the other people haven't had as dramatic experiences. Is there a sense that you feel like you've been chosen to experience stuff that, or is everyone kind of all over with what they're seeing and, encountering?
it's one of those things. Like I don't know why I've had so many experiences. Yeah, it's could be suggestive. Am I seeing stuff because of I had, again, like I had some very powerful experiences before I ever came to the ranch.
Yeah.
And there's some people that claim they're more in tune with things or whatnot, or not, but I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
how can you ever really prove that?
Exactly right.
And then there's there's been times where people have reported seeing something and person standing next to them can't see anything.
Yeah.
And so we've had groups of people where we're all standing next to each other and one person. So I'm thinking I want to say it was season two, maybe it was season three, but we had lockout, and we were shooting the rockets, and some of them were on top of the mesa, and some of us were over by the command center.
Mhm.
And one of the guys on top of the mesa, he basically felt like he was in an MRI machine, and the hair on his arms was standing straight up. He felt like he was just exposed to a lot of electrical or potentially magnetic field, but everybody that's around him was fine. And so it's like, why does what's why does one person maybe experience something when everybody else around doesn't?
Yeah.
And we've had some medical stuff happen like that, or physical reactions where you have two or three people standing in one spot and everybody else around them's fine, but they're experiencing something. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I wouldn't say like I've been chosen or anything like that. I think
But you
that's too strong.
are something, I mean, something you are sensitive to some of the stuff that's happening out there. I mean,
Yeah, that's probably a better word. Maybe I'm a little bit more sensitive to things. And could that play in like one of my beliefs? Could that be because of my belief system? Maybe. I don't know.
yeah. Or the
Um,
fact that, I mean, like people who have spiritual experiences, some people think that that does kind of flip a switch and make an
Yeah,
awareness that suddenly you're aware of things that maybe you wouldn't have been aware of before. And
yeah.
that's all
There's
part of the mystery of all of this, man. It's like
yeah,
so out of this world and so perplexing because
yeah,
all the tools and ways that we analyze things typically don't really fit with this. And that's what makes it so, intriguing and
yeah, yeah.
fascinating.
I've been asked, a lot of similar questions like this over the years, and yeah, there's one there, and what we really think it is, kind of thing, and it's like it's
Yeah,
still like I don't. But what we've all kind of said is, yeah, we definitely believe that there's some kind of intelligence involved, whether that is a near peer or
mhm,
if maybe that is, more of a extraterrestrial. I don't know, or is it more spiritual in nature?
yeah,
Because I can tell you, I've had experiences where whatever we were interacting with, I definitely felt more was like technological based and maybe could either be a near peer, which is scary in and of itself if they have that kind
absolutely.
of
That's
capability.
probably the scariest option of all of them. I mean,
Yeah,
if China has the ability to come into our country and do this kind of thing,
yeah.
I mean, we've been
Or
leapfrogged.
right, or
Yeah,
is it someone within our own government kind of thing, right? Like, and that's where it's like I don't want to try and like feed any kind of conspiracy theory or anything. It's just ask. Uh, I'm just trying to ask the question,
yeah,
Um, and so yeah, but that's where again I've had more what I would say is an experience where feels more technological, where it feels okay. Could this have been some kind of interaction with again a near peer or beings we have no idea who they are, or
yeah,
extraterrestrial, or I don't really want to go to that word,
yeah,
but then on the other hand, I've had experiences where I can't help but go more into like a spiritual side or poltergeist or the spiritual realm, if you will.
yeah,
Um, but then again, like my viewpoint and how I've seen things is yeah, I definitely believe in that side too.
yeah,
Based on not only my personal things that I had happen years before I ever came to the ranch, but then things that I've witnessed as a law enforcement officer and how and yeah, I guess I don't know if it's my own confirmation bias, but how I've viewed some of those experiences, and how maybe that's how I had to compartmentalize it, in some of those. But there's definitely some kind of intelligence that we're dealing with. And again, I don't know where that is or what that is.
yeah. I have, so you guys, I mean, like from my perspective, in a lot of ways, you guys are on the vanguard of this kind of research that's probing the very nature of what our reality is and how we may have mistaken it over the years. Has there been any preparation given to you guys? Like if you make a major discovery, and a lot of people poo-poo that idea that a show on History Channel is going to make this major discovery. But I think that you guys are actually doing what you say you're doing. So the possibility exists that there may be something discovered that's huge and can potentially ontologically shock a lot of people. Have they prepared you for that and given you like any kind of protocol about how to understand that yourself, or is it just like,
You guys literally see how we're reacting live.
yeah,
Obviously it's like 8 or 9 months later, but
yeah,
yeah, like say this potential direwolf carcass that we saw,
yeah,
or
yeah,
that
absolutely,
that jawbone, and what the biologist himself says. Like Ben's one of his jobs, from my understanding, is working in one of these museums is skeletal reconstruction of ancient dead animals. Like he's the
hmm,
guy that goes and puts a saber-toothed tiger back together when they
yeah,
unbury it or whatnot.
yeah,
Um, and again, like he says, if you had given him that jawbone, initially he would have been like, either this is something with some kind of direwolf DNA in it, or it is a juvenile direwolf, would be his initial reaction.
yeah,
Obviously, we still have some testing to do, but that's where he was like, and the presentation that he gave us, you guys obviously only get like 5 minutes of it, but we were in a room talking with him about this for a couple hours,
yeah. That's another
right?
problem that people with this, I mean, people don't understand is that like we're only getting highlights of this stuff that you guys are getting, reams of data. So your guys' conclusions may not always seem like we can't totally understand what led you to those conclusions because we're not seeing the buildup for a lot of
Yeah.
it, you know. But
Yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
and they did do because obviously they have to cut down to a certain time period with some of the stuff, but they do show some of that conversation that I was like, okay, I'm happy they at least showed that to maybe give people that idea
Yeah.
because he literally shows 4 or 5. He's showed us 4 or 5 different jawbones from different canines, and the amount of teeth behind the big canine that comes up from the bottom, and like modern canines, I want to say they're at like 7 teeth now, if I remember correctly,
Mhm.
and sometimes they might have 6, and that's kind of more the one-off genetic weird thing that could happen
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
way back in the day, like a dire wolf, it's that big canine and then 6 every time, if I remember correctly. And that's what that jawbone
Yeah.
was the big canine and then 6 teeth, and then where he shows where the muscles on your jaw for the bite power. He went
Hmm.
through an entire segment of that, and he showed us an eastern gray wolf. He showed us a coyote. He showed us I want to say a modern dog, and then he compared that jawbone sample that we took, and it matches perfectly with the dire wolf. And so either this was a modern canine that just happens to have the one jawbone that perfectly matches a deceased extinct animal. And we find that one carcass on the first time we've ever gone down this river and find it.
Yeah.
Like all the perfect one-offs match up.
Yeah, exactly. People talk
Y-
about Occam's razor, right? Well, what's more likely that all of these coincidences line up, or it's just what it may look
Yeah,
like it is, which was, and it's also in a site where these things have been reported being seen, you know?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like there's witness testimony.
yeah. There's these stories going back generations now, where and then we pull this carcass out of the water, and they didn't show when we're sitting there in that water for 30, 40 minutes. Guys, is this like just a really big dog, or is this a coyote? And us really looking at it, going, no, this can't just be. And at one point we are almost like, it's just a dead dog, like whatever.
Yeah.
But then we were like, well, let's actually like take a sample of the jaw and have Ben look at it and see what he says, and kind of be this better safe than sorry thing. And yeah, we should have taken the whole damn head, or at least move the carcass out of the river and put it on the bank and come back later. You know, after it was because especially after we had the conversation with him, and he's like, yeah, I need like the rest of the skull to really tell what this is because of the sagittals crest and all that. And like if we had the whole skull, he'd have been able to go, yeah, this is definitely what we think it is, or you know.
Did it later like just get chewed up by predators and lost, or what happened to the rest of it?
Um, it essentially stayed in the river, and we weren't able to get out there for an extended period of time, which sucks. But we had some storms come through, and when we went back, there was still some left, and we got what we could. But the piece we really wanted with the head was gone, and so it was just one of those things that sucked, but is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I mean, you
Because
guys
like
are,
we had no idea what it could potentially be at that time we found it, and it was so covered in maggots and nasty and disgusting, and it was like one of those things like, do we really need to take this jawbone off this thing? And you know,
the
but it
one
was
thing
just,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you're fine.
I was going to say one thing that I find remarkable about you guys is that the patience you guys display when things keep going wrong, like with the drilling, for instance. Like I'm in the middle of the new season and you guys are having a hard time drilling into the mesa again. And
Mm.
it's like you get close and then it's snatched away. You get a little bit closer, it gets snatched away. And all these, and you guys are usually just, that's just the nature of the ranch. Whereas a lot of folks would be like, God damn it, or whatever, I mean,
Oh,
like totally. Does that
oh,
happen? We
trust
just don't
me.
see it.
That isn't entirely how we're reacting, but yeah, and I think that's what they're trying to show with the
Yeah,
drilling activities through the past 6 or 7 episodes,
yeah,
because
Yeah,
the
yeah,
drillers were expecting this to be an easy job, kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
And they weren't expecting to be out there as long as they were. And you could tell by the end of it, they were so ready to be done with the place.
yeah.
And after all the equipment stuff, and that's where I'm hoping that they really go into some of that, to show what happened with their beacons and the equipment and stuff, and really go into that conversation of like the manufacturer and what they had to say, and really show just how big of a pain in the butt it was to even get this one drill hole done, and now we've got to get another one because the idea is to do the cross section like an
Yeah, so you
X-ray,
can get it, yeah, get views of the
get
whole
a
thing.
better idea of what's in there before we go and try to either pull it out or whatnot. And and I guess to come back to your original question is, you're gonna see it if it's filmed. You're gonna see it as we saw it, and I think that's where the last 5 years is proof of that, where we're under these NDAs,
Mhm.
and you're not going to hear about it until the show comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have been really good about that.
And so, like, again, come back to the dire wolf. And this is why I use that one, or the potential dire wolf. Um, is I saw comments, well, the scientific community would have known about that. No, they won't, because it's private property,
Yeah.
and the private owner will come out with the information when he wants to come out with it.
Hmm.
Or as you're seeing it as we're going with the investigation.
Yeah.
So there was no reporting this to any scientific community or anything like that, because the NDAs and the contracts, History Channel has a right of showing it first
Yeah.
and bring it to people's attention.
Yeah.
And so no, there was no announcement the moment we found out, oh, hey, let's go. Hey, Ben,
Yeah.
call all your science buddies.
Yeah. You
Let's
guys are the scientific
follow them.
community that's involved in this. I mean, your crew
Right.
is the one doing the research, and if it's not released by you, who else is going to release it? I mean, it's sort of
Exactly. Yeah.
nonsensical, you know?
Yeah. And so it's like, and so there were people like, oh, if they had actually found this, people no, they're not going to know until it comes out, and until we publicly start sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. What
And
do you?
so yeah, like
So,
if we find something in the mesa and then we're able to, you, you know, you're gonna see it from the show.
yeah, which is goes back to my question. I mean, are you worried about making that kind of huge discovery and knowing it for a year in advance before the whole world knows this huge bomb is about to drop, on how people conceive of things? That would
Oh,
have to be
I think,
hard.
oh yeah, it's hard, and it's like it's crazy now that it's all coming out, from what we filmed last year. Now we
Hmm.
can finally talk about it, but now it's like, oh man, feels like so long ago. But
Yeah.
I think that's also something that plays to our favor, because we see something like that, and we all are going to sit on it, and in our behind the scenes conversations we're able to talk about it, and if it's something that big, that gives us potentially that 9 to 10 months to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and what to say and how to present it and all of that stuff and consider all the ramifications of all that. Yeah. I mean, real quick, I mean, how is Brandon Fugal to work with? I mean, he's obviously put a lot of money into this, and his heart seems to be is in the solving of this mystery. Do you feel like he's been fair and treated you guys right through all this? I mean, you guys are the face of the show, so just curious.
Yeah, I've had a lot of really good positive interactions with him, and again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have been a part of the team and be
Yeah.
brought in. And I know he's gone to bat on my side of becoming the cast member, and getting me in a better position, and um, helping that. And yeah, I've overall I've had a really good positive interaction with him, and from what I've seen, he's definitely wants to find out what's going on with the property. And at first he was like, I'm sure he's shared this, and I've heard him share this in other venues, I believe. And he's like, at first he was a big skeptic too, and then he had things happen, just like a lot of people. And it's again, that kind of comes back to there's no rhyme or reason of who sees things and or what. I've seen where someone who isn't religious
Hmm.
have experiences that they can't explain, you can see them questioning their belief system, and then on the other side, people who are religious not have anything happen, and vice versa. It there's no
Yeah.
rhyme or reason to it that I can see.
Yeah.
Um, but he definitely had things happen and has had things happen, and um, so yeah, he was like, yeah, there's definitely something going on out here, and that's mo most people who do experience something out there, or if you want to talk about the hitchhiker side, there's things that happen to people who come visit the ranch, and they're like, okay, whatever, and this
Yeah.
is neat, yeah, but then they go home and something happens there, and they're like, I will never get back.
Yeah. Has anything like that happened to you?
Oh yeah, yeah, my family, we've had multiple things happen at our house, and I've this is what's another really cool thing for me is I've had having been in law enforcement now, is there's been that stigmatism just like in the military or in like airlines and stuff where you don't talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where I'm like, I saw it, or if I've experienced something, I'm fine sharing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had multiple things happen at my house, and that's what's been weird is it's my family seen it. Um, we've my oldest son had something really interesting happen with him, and I share that story on the website.
Yeah.
And and then you talk to other individuals, and um, things have happened at their homes, and like Travis has had stuff happen at his, Tom's had something happen at his, and I know they've shared some of that in public arenas, and I believe Jay Stratton has shared things too, but um, it's yeah, there's things that happen, and I don't know how to explain it, and that's
Yeah.
where I've had a unique, I go to my belief system and how I choose to interact with it, and I've seen results in or what I believe are results in a positive way, and um, it's just yeah, it's real,
Exactly.
you know.
It's like the whole thing, man. It's just like it's a big shrug, but it's
Yeah.
so absolutely fascinating. We're about an hour, but I wanted to ask you one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, you've spent 6 years in the Marine Reserves, right? Was I right on
Yep.
that?
Yep.
And then Travis has been working with the federal government, and the surveillance has been going on where you guys are getting these low flights over and helicopters, black helicopters, that sort of thing. And you were
Hmm.
mentioning earlier, like, you're not sure, you're dealing with an intelligence, but you're not sure if it's a near peer or if it's our own government or if it's
Yeah.
aliens or whatever else. Has all of this changed the way that you view the United States government? Does it make you more skeptical of any kind of explanations that may come out of government? And
You're
I
gonna
don't
get me
mean,
in trouble.
well, no, I don't want to. So if you,
Oh,
however you can phrase it or
well,
whatever, but
I guess it's like I think our government is not what it used to be.
yeah,
And I'm not surprised that if there are illegal surveillance going on of American citizens, in fact, I think they're targeting us more than anybody else. Like,
yeah,
just look at the state of the country.
yeah,
Like they are allowing, I call them enemy combatants because anybody who comes into our country and is not a citizen and starts attacking and robbing and murdering American citizens, they are enemy combatants. They are here, they hate us, and that's what they're doing. And there are those in our own government who are facilitating that. And there's a pretty big word that we use for that, and it starts with T. And so, no, I'm not surprised. Like it's kind of one of those things with law enforcement. You don't put anything past anybody,
yeah,
and that's kind of one of those bad things with law enforcement is you start viewing everybody in a certain light because
sure,
of what you've seen and your experiences, and that's life or death.
yeah,
And and this is the thing is I don't trust a dang person in our government because I don't think very many of them have morals or ethics anymore
yeah,
because they lack a actual belief system like what I believe,
yeah,
and they don't give a dang about what our constitution and those rights that limit the government, not the people. And so when it comes to like things with the ranch, Yeah, I think some of the flights they're just having fun, but
Yeah.
there are other ones where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a little bit more because it's kind of that intuition thing, you know. You,
Yeah.
it's that
Well,
gut feeling kind
and then
of thing
sometimes
where,
you see helicopters right after you see it have a sighting. I mean,
yeah,
they seem
yeah,
correlated somehow, and it's like, are you guys monitoring the airspace above the ranch and then sending out
yeah.
missions to capture that or
Yeah,
whatever?
like what are they doing? What do they potentially know? I don't know. And it's like I know a lot of them view the average American as an idiot and they have no respect for them.
Yeah,
And if you view people like that, what are you willing to do to them?
absolutely.
And so it's like it's one of those things where hopefully enough Americans are waking up to it. But yeah, it's I don't like I have I did another one and they kind of asked the question of, well, if say we have a first contact thing, who would you want to meet them? And I'm like, nobody in our government. I don't trust
Yeah,
any of them. They're
yeah,
all going to be a poor representation of, you know,
yeah. That's a whole nother question. That's a massive question. How do we represent ourselves if there is another intelligence out there and they're making contact in some way? How do we begin to even debate who represents us,
mhm.
because there is no representative person who represents everybody. The
Yeah.
difference,
Well,
everyone's, you can't,
yeah. No, and like just think about this, like just throw this out there. If say we run into a being or alien or whatever you want to call it, and they have a higher ability, say they can read minds
Yeah.
and they can see who you are deep down. That's pretty scary,
It is pretty scary. And that,
you
I
know.
mean, you talk about the panic that people might feel ontologically if something like this comes out. That is
Hmm.
one of the things that would shatter people because all of a sudden, all the deception is no longer possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think people will know how to even begin to react to each other.
Yeah,
It's like,
and that's kind of one of those things where if you start looking into, if you go down like my belief system, the physical world is not the real world. The spiritual world is the real world, and this is the short-term experience where we have an opportunity to learn and become better.
yeah,
And we've literally been given the book
yep,
on how to do that, and yet it's one of the most demonized books now.
yeah.
And it literally tells you, hey, by the way, when you go to the other side, you're not going to be able to hide anything.
Yeah.
And so it's like if there's a being that can literally look down inside of you and know every little dark secret, that's pretty scary. And then yeah, you have these people who are coming into this and they can see right through them. It's
They're
a
not going to like
pretty
what they see.
and yeah,
They,
and it's like, wow, that's a scary thought, So
yeah,
just a just an interesting thought to think about.
yeah. It's almost as if though that kind of accountability might lead to positive growth ultimately. Like
You
if
would
we,
hope so.
you'd hope so. And that's something we won't know until we go through that, if we go through that. But that kind of being forced to reckon, because I think people a lot of times lie to themselves. It's like they don't
Oh yeah.
know, and where they build a narrative in their heads about what's real and what's not, and then when that's shattered by whatever, it's like it can totally be a really challenging and dissembling experience, and that's going to be scary to watch if it happens, but
Oh yeah.
potentially,
And so like this is where it's really cool for me is after those experiences that I had years ago with after my dad passed and that growth and just the shift in my mind and the shift in my perspective as it I was introduced essentially to it was kind of interesting how that all lined up to basically like the self mentoring the self in better self improvement kind of
yeah.
stuff so like think like Tony Robbins Bob Proctor and stuff but I was very blown away when I really dived into a lot of that.
Mhm.
How much of it is found in the Bible or
Sure. Yeah.
or in other scripture? Like I believe that the Book of Mormon is that also.
Yeah.
Um, and how much of that was there? But
Yeah.
these guys are teaching it in such a way. Yeah, I can't help but see those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see where
Um,
they're drawing their principles from a lot of the
yeah,
time. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and it's very yeah, the principles, the ethics, a lot of that stuff. I see a lot of those connections, and I'm like, I see what they're doing and how they're trying to help people, and I'm like, I'd rather be a part of that than not.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I mean, I'm not Mormon. I'll go ahead and state that. But at the same time, I respect the Mormon religion for a lot of reasons. The people who are in it are
Hmm.
often the most decent people you're ever going to meet. And they have an open mind about things like this and other things. Like they are, I find that really, really, I respect that about them and their approach to the universe. I think that a
Hmm.
lot of other denominations would do well to be more open-minded about sort of cosmic questions, but also focusing on the unity of family and all of that. My brother is a converted Mormon. My sister, her
Hmm.
daughter is a converted Mormon, and their lives have been vastly improved by that experience. So I just appreciate it. So
And
just to
that's
let you know where
where,
I'm coming from,
oh, you're fine. And and that's my thing is like I'm definitely not one that within say like, yeah, I go because I'd rather my kids not have that than not.
Yeah,
Because I think in the last 60 years we've seen what happens when you don't have that, especially just it's not hard to see what's going on in society. Um, and you can go back to the 60s and really see that's when you see that pivot point. Um, but yeah, I definitely don't look at things the same.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of interest. That's a whole different discussion.
Hey, of course, yeah,
Um, because yeah, it's like when it is the what they talk about, like when your mind is enlightened, like you actually see it, and it's hard to describe.
yeah,
It's the when the people start asking the right questions.
mhm,
Someone has to go through something to start having some perspective changes and start rethinking things and really start questioning. And one of those big things is stop acting like you know everything is one of
huh,
the first steps.
absolutely. That's one of the
And
biggest problems we have right now, I think.
yeah, and step away from acting like you're the most intelligent person and maybe that, you know, um, there is something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, humility, both spiritual and intellectual humility to be like, we have scientists and they're great and they do what they do, but they too often act like they have all the answers when really they've just mastered the system that they themselves created. And there's a whole lot more mystery in the world that we haven't even begun to wrestle with. And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
shows like yours are doing a service in hopefully helping people realize that there's a mystery still exists. And we should be wondering at the universe, and those answers may help us get a step up ultimately from where we're at.
Yeah, and it's that's one of those topics that's is interesting for me to think about and have conversations about is I don't view like I hate saying that I'm a part of a religion because I don't like religions because if when you read the books, the basically Satan's the one who created religions because it pulls away from what you're actually supposed to be focused on.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, I go because so like me, I go and partake in certain things or just because I do see and believe in the authority and certain aspects, but I don't go because I want to be part of the group
yeah,
kind of thing. Like I've in fact it's like if I could just go do what we call some of the ordinances and just do that and be done in 10 minutes, I would love nothing more than do that.
yeah,
Like I don't need all the other fluff
yeah,
because I don't know. It's meant to be more personal. In my opinion, it's meant to be like we're there's the two sides, there's the two conflicts. It's either you understand that it's a personal thing and we're supposed to be individuals and we have our free agency and it's a personal journey for each of us, but or you're a part of the collective and that's not the good side.
yeah. And I mean, people who, whenever you have groups of people who are collected around, you know, basically a small group of people in power who tell everyone else what they can think and believe and experience, that's a
Yeah.
form of control, you know? And I
Yep.
think that that leads to, like you said, bad places.
Well, and that's, that's again, like if you understand one of the things that is taught in Christianity as a whole, um, or what happened prior, it's called the war in heaven. That was the thing it was fought over was either we all come here and this was God's plan is to come here and be an individual and have the opportunity to learn and follow and choose to follow what the plan is, or the other side was no, everyone's going to do what they're told, they're not going to have the free will, but everyone comes back,
Yeah.
and the collective and then I control everything.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the concepts that it's there, like in every book it's there.
Yeah.
And so I, that's how I view a lot of things, is obviously through this lens, because and the amount of time and effort and studying to get to that point, you know, it's been that journey, it's been that personal journey for me, and it's not something I came to lightly.
Well, I'm out of time, but I really, really appreciate this conversation, man. Both
Yeah.
your journey personally and the journey of the show and where it's going. And I thank you for all the hours of entertainment I've spent watching it and learning. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm happy to come on and have a conversation. It's been good.
Okay, cool.